right. Well, speaking of how Labour Party would have been better, I'm gonna play BBC Hot Talk here. The Labour Party has done a policy change on tax cuts and negative gearing. Well, I'll just basically run through the policy change. So after the last elections, this time around, Labour Party has looked at two things. One of them was
Yep.
the three-stage tax cuts that the Liberal government had promised, and they're saying that they're going to stick by the stage three tax cuts, even though initially they said that people that are earning over $180,000 would not get tax cuts, but now they've come around to it and would not be challenging that. And the other was that they've abandoned negative gearing, so they'll maintain the status quo on both of these things. What do you guys think about
Right.
this?
I think the negative gearing move's smart. What was the first one? The other one?
So taxing, giving tax cuts to people earning over $180,000 a year. Which in defense, like, it's not their policy. It was a promised policy of the Liberal government, which they're not going to challenge if they come into power.
Dude, we talked about this before. The zeitgeist is moving more and more towards favorable corporatism. Albo is smart and knows how to knock back a beer. He knows that unions are out and to be not as tough on business. So he's moving a little bit to the center. Bus move.
But is it though?
Yes, that's my 2 cents.
Ali, don't you reckon this is the Liberal Party's version of how they couldn't knock Medicare, so they reluctantly just stick by it? And, you know, when Medicare is put into the hands of the Liberals, they'll privatise all the behind-the-scenes stuff and make it less effective and shit anyway. Don't you think that this is the Labor Party's version of that? That they're like, okay, look, we can't get into power if we get rid of negative gearing and we don't give the wealthy their tax cuts. So we'll just give that to them. It's one of those uncomfortable negotiations that these major parties need to have in order to get into power.
Yeah, I was reading that Labour Party did an assessment on how much they could earn from changing that stage three tax thing, or how much they would lose, and they came to the conclusion that the revenue generated from not giving those tax cuts is not worth the political cost. So they can meet that somewhere else.
Yeah, that's the whole thing is like, look, there are many, many ways to reform the tax system that at the end of the day give us more money in the coffers. That was just one way. I really think that, look, it's a very imperfect system. And if you are versing a extremely powerful, extremely concentrated elite that are saying, these are our minimum requirements, that if you want to get into power, you have to meet them. Why not?
What do you think, Ali?
No, I think electorally it makes a lot of sense. Well, particularly because like the position that is not in favor of these was didn't win with Bill Shorten. So obviously it would be insanity to keep doing something over and over again, expecting a different result. But the point,
and you know what else as well? I've talked to Bill about this, and he said, if I could do my time again, those are like some of the things that I just would have been fucking hush hush about before the election. Or like just would have reformed them or whatever. Like he would have sat there and reviewed it back. He said that really started to bleed. It was very easy to turn those into scare campaigns about housing taxes.
And apparently part of the reason why they've done this is because that there's news on the street that the Liberal Party's plan for the election campaign was that the whole COVID and all of that vaccination stuff they've bungled. So they wanted to make a big deal about these tax cuts. They wanted to make the election about these tax cuts. And basically Labour Party is just not giving them that ammunition.
Yeah, no oxygen at all. That's such a beautiful tactic in this environment, isn't it? And
smart. I think it's smart.
It's so good. Like Albanese has done the exact opposite tactic of Bill Shorten, which is to just shut up, make the entire focus on the government.
Mm.
And then the government all of a sudden is both the government and the opposition. And it has to constantly fight with itself in terms of the messaging. And if just the Labor Party just sits back, watches the current move in, they're going to squeak through, I think. I think
Yeah.
even
Yep,
in this
yep.
environment, even with the media bias, it's so close. These elections, it's like what you were saying maybe half a year ago, Ali, that most elections now, you're really fighting over a few percentile. So there's never going to be an election. Well, let's not say never, but it's a lot more. It's a lot less likely that there's going to be those huge blowouts where someone has 100 seats and the other party has 50. It's always just going to be like 77 versus 78.
Yeah, it's always really close, and it always comes down to like those super marginal seats. Unless you've got a character like Trump that basically just completely turns the entire political table around. If you're going to get like normal status quo liberal candidate and normal status quo labor candidate, then the difference is always really, really marginal. Like Malcolm Turnbull, the election that he won was so close, and Scott Morrison's victory over Bill Shorten is touted as this amazing victory. It was amazing because he was supposed to lose, but it's not because he won by a huge margin. So it's always, I don't know why it is. It's always like we now live in a world where like most countries have extremely divided voting bases. Like, even in the US, where it's normal now for the race to get really close, back in the day, if Reagan won, he won most states. Or like the further back you go, whichever candidate won the elections usually won an overwhelming majority of states. So you either sided with Democrats or Republicans. But now it's always razor thin.
That's because nobody. In fact, I've got something to change about how I perceive media bias now, because it's not. Yes, the old model was that you had 5 channels, and so you just needed to get 5 executives maximum on side, and then you'd have just one message to the public, and then you'd get those huge blowouts. But I think now, because of social media, everybody's just in their own little bubbles. And so now the game is to try and pick out where those bubbles are and influence what those people are thinking. And so you're not going to be able to do that as effectively as you could back in the 80s. There's too many channels and avenues of information, too many uncontrollable elements and variations of it. And I think that that's why you're seeing that narrowing. And also you're seeing that the major parties are losing votes.
Yeah.
But I think it's smart too, because like those issues are such non-issues. Who gives a fuck about negative gearing? If you can push,
Dude, a lot of people give a fuck about negative gearing.
Yeah, but what's more important, negative gearing or the fucking Great Barrier Reef?
Exactly. He's got you there, Ali.
And
you know what's
then we can eat the clownfish.
Yes.
Great Barrier Reef would lose votes, but negative gearing would lose more votes.
That's what I'm saying. That's my point. So they're being tactically. It's a good move.
Yeah, I think it's a good move, unless you're a principled person and believe in policy should always be what you truly believe.
Bullshit.
Those people are dickheads, aren't they? It's such a stupid argument.
It's thinning out the commies.
Imperfect dickheads that sit there. And first off, like if you look at it, it's just like you're never so great, are you? You look at these people that are always saying that like you lost your way because you're blah blah blah, like accusing politicians of that kind of stuff. And then you look at their grasp on policy, and it's like, what do you know? And it's like, vote yes. They don't really have a great. These moral warriors never really even understand the policies that they're so outraged by to begin with. Yeah, I think that anybody that's even remotely educated understands that. Yeah, it's a give and take.
Talking about moral warriors, Greens dubbed this move by Labour Party of
here we go
as one of the
cowards.
I think I'm paraphrasing here, but one of the greatest betrayals of Australian history.
Oh, for fuck's sake. That's insane.
yeah.
Yeah, right.
Right up there with Robert Menzies selling iron to the Japanese.
Yeah.
The Labour Party
Yeah.
dumping a policy that would guarantee that they'd stay in opposition forever.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
That's just perfect Greens.
Ah.
And the whole point of that, again, is just an electoral strategy. They've just sensed an opportunity to cast up some of the Labor vote, and that's what they're doing there. And it's very, very, to use something that Greens voters always say, disappointing.
It's thinning out the commies from Labor. It's great.
mm,
Well,
yeah, I suppose you're right. Fuck them. You don't need them. What you do need is a bunch of people that are sitting around in Sydney's West just being like, why the fuck are there so many duplexes? Well, Rudd seems like a legend. He knows handball.
I think that works. That's okay.